I'm back with another review of an entry in the Rocky franchise, Rocky III. A few weeks ago, it turned 40 years old. In my continuing of the tradition of reviewing a movie on its anniversary, or at least around the same time frame, it continues here. I had a chance to rewatch this film a couple nights ago. I think this is probably one of, if not the better sequels to the original Rocky film. My personal favorite sequel, besides the first Creed, is still Rocky VI, but this one I'd say is an honorable mention in many ways. After defeating Apollo Creed and earning the title of the heavyweight champion, Rocky goes on a winning streak, defending his title 10 times against certain fighters until a hungry fighter named Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T, challenges him to a fight. And if you've seen the movie, you all know how it plays out. Rocky loses embarrassingly and has to find a way to get his edge back, being trained by someone who is the last person he would expect to have train him. Apollo Creed. Stallone returns not only as the titular character, but as the writer and director. If Rocky was already iconic from the original film with the Bill Conti musical theme, running up the steps, famous lines such as, "Yo Adrian," this film adds more to the iconography, not just with the musical themes that are used in the training montage, but the opening song by Survivor called Eye of the Tiger, which I believe was Oscar nominated for Best Original Song. Albeit very overplayed on radio stations and in various films, one of the worst offenders, I still really like the song, and I will always listen to it whenever it comes on. Well, at least whenever I'm in the mood for it. But the tone that the song gives off, and very much indicative of the actual film, instead of the classic underdog story, it's someone who goes on a path of revenge or in a way to regain his composure and his self-respect. The song's usage in the opening montage show just how really well off Rocky has become as a fighter and as a person in society, appearing in various commercials on TV, showing up in certain television specials, meeting the president, and I don't think it's really a surprise. He's experiencing exactly what Apollo went through when he was at the height of his success, while Clubber Lang is rising through the ranks and becomes more and more hungry to take on the heavyweight champion, Balboa. This is a stark contrast to the Rocky that we're used to in the previous two films. A very humble and not really the smartest guy in the room, and he still really isn't that way. This one he becomes a lot more sophisticated and has a more classic dialect, I suppose, even though he still has that street talk. "Nobody knows nothing, you owe yourself." "You're wrong, friends owe. Friends don't owe. They do it because they want to." You could say that this is very jarring when we see what came before, and to a certain extent maybe it is, but I think it's a very natural ebb and flow of how this character will evolve over time. Reportedly, Stallone based a lot of this story on his own personal experiences, how he became a lot more disconnected from normal life when he became more successful as a movie star. And I think it's a very realistic portrayal of what happens to somebody like this. They get so wrapped up in all the attention and the love and adoration from the public that they start to lose sight of where they came from in the first place. And Apollo Creed in many ways is the perfect successor to Mickey Goldmill. He knows what it's like to have somebody question him on whether or not he actually has the heart of a fighter. Things start to brew up when Rocky announces his retirement and Mr. T publicly challenges him to a fight, and we later find out that Mick was actually carrying Rocky, choosing certain people to fight because he saw what Clubber Lang was capable of, and he didn't think Rocky had it in him to take him on. Still feeling the need to prove himself, he doesn't really take himself seriously in the fight, and when the actual fight happens between the two, Rocky's clearly shaken up and feels very unprepared by this whole situation, also distracted by the fact that Mick was violently shoved by Clubber Lang in the locker room in the hallway, and he ends up passing away as a result, causing Rocky to go further and further into a deep state of depression. We'll talk about some parts of the movie that I think are really not necessary, but in a lot of ways, I think this is one of the franchise's shining moments. Stallone continues to nail it as Balboa. He's very endearing and very likable. We as the audience want to see him overcome this new obstacle, and it's a very different type of obstacle than what we're used to. You could have easily had something similar happen from the previous two films, but then again it would be kind of bland and very samey. And you have your usual boxing movie tropes. The training, the actual fights, there's some drama, some self-doubt about whether or not he can actually win. But the way the film plays out, it does it in the ways that you would not necessarily expect. In my experience as a film buff, we don't really see that too often in a movie like this, at least not in this type of capacity. So as a result, certain characters like Adrian and Apollo, who either didn't really have a whole lot to do in the previous two films or were very one note, they actually get a chance to show a different side of themselves when they try to push Rocky to be the best version that he can be. Seeing Apollo Creed having respect for Rocky when he's in the commentator booth as a guest commentator, and his first encounter with Clubber Lang. Clubber refuses to shake his hand. I love the evil glare that he gives right back to him. If Apollo doesn't like somebody, you know that there's a problem. And the scene where he meets Rocky at the gym at nighttime, talking to him about how he had that eye of the tiger and that he needs to get it back by going back to the beginning. It's one of my favorite scenes in the franchise. I actually get shivers every time I listen to him say this stuff.
You had that eye of the tiger, man, the edge. And now you gotta get it back. And the way to get it back is to go back to the beginning. You know what I mean?
I kind of wish that Carson Wentz had that moment with somebody. Maybe Nick Foles could have done that for him. It's all in the past, so yeah, let's move on from that. If any sports fans are watching this, you probably know what I'm talking about. I don't know why I went on to that tangent, but I did. Also in this film, we get to see Paulie as one of his cut man, or his cornerman, I guess. I don't know the official term for it. Paulie is still the same kind of jerk that we've seen in all the other movies, but in one way or another, he gets to show that he does have a soft side underneath him, albeit he does have some racial tendencies when they go out to LA, and he doesn't really like being one of the few white people in the room. And Rocky lets him know right away that don't talk like that. That's not right. I also really like in the final fight that he's the first one to actually notice what Rocky's up to, because when he starts egging him on,
He's getting killed. Oh, no. He's not getting killed. He's getting mad.
I literally just got shivers all over my arms thinking about that. And it has some of the franchise's most really emotionally powerful scenes, like Mick's death in the locker room, or when Mickey finally reveals why he carried him the way he did and protected him from Clubber Lang. And Mick loves Rocky like a son and actually cares for him like a son. And watching the death scene a few nights ago, one thing that always gets me is that any guy in the world who makes himself out to be a hard ass, when they can show their tender side, oh, man, I can't even. Probably the best scene in the movie is when Adrian is able to talk some sense into Rocky at the beach. Rocky clearly is not really putting much effort when Apollo's training him. Adrian's the only one who can push the right button, and he's able to get him to confess his own insecurities, that basically he's afraid that he'll be remembered as a coward.
It doesn't matter because you're the one that's got to settle it. Get rid of it! Because when all the smoke is cleared and everyone's through chanting your name, it's just gonna be us!
What I love about this scene is that even though we've seen in the previous two films that Adrian was not afraid to stand up for herself or call somebody out, this was the first time that you actually get to see her actually show that she does have a backbone and isn't afraid to show Rocky that he actually is more than capable of what he's able to do. Any guy in the world would do anything to have a woman like that in their lives, especially a wife or a girlfriend. I know I would. Let's talk about Mr. T. He's probably one of the most memorable parts of this movie, even though his role is very limited. He plays one note throughout the whole thing, has no respect for Rocky or Apollo, makes a sexual remark or advance towards Adrian, almost leading into a brawl. All we really know about this guy is that he's from Chicago, and that he has a strong desire to beat Rocky. All that being said though, Mr. T plays it perfectly. And his lines, like Willem Dafoe or Ian McDiarmid, just so quotable, at least for me. You can't hear those quotes and not know that it's him. No, I don't hate Balboa. I pity the fool. And I will destroy any man who tries to take what I got. And I just remembered something. My first time of ever hearing about Rocky III was in the Dr. Dolittle movie with Eddie Murphy when he's trying to talk down that tiger off the ledge.
Oh, remember that song, Eye of the Tiger from Rocky 3? It's the eye of the tiger, it's that one from Rocky 3.
Not Eye of the Moose, not Eye of the Bull, Eye of the Tiger. I also heard Rocky references in the movie Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton, but that's besides the point. If I had to pick my favorite boxing match in the whole franchise, this might actually be it for me. Because not only does Rocky do his cast iron jaw routine, he goes full Apollo Creed from the moment that it starts. He just goes right after Mr. T and starts unloading on him. Also being the fact that he is able to prove to the world that he can fight somebody like Mr. T and not just a bunch of fighters who can't really put up much of a fight to begin with. And while he does get knocked down a couple times in the second round, by the end of it, he starts to egg him on, saying, "Come on, champ, you ain't so bad. You ain't nothing." At first, we're not really sure why he's doing this, but then when Apollo's talking to him and he says he's getting tired, and it cuts back to Clubber Lang all out of breath, we as the audience start to go, oh. And little details that I picked up on that I've always noticed these. Rocky usually ends these boxing matches with a punch from his left hand. This time, though, it's a punch from his right hand. Not that it really matters or anything, but it's kind of cool that they did that. Very much in vein of the rest of the movie, where it's very much the opposite, in a lot of ways, of what came before and what comes after, as far as the franchise goes. Now, I already mentioned this with Mr. T a little bit, being very one note. There's some things in this movie that don't really work. The wrestling match with Hulk Hogan, that was completely and stupidly unnecessary and doesn't add anything to the overall plot. As far as negatives with the movie go, that's pretty much it. But I do really like the final favor that Rocky owes Apollo when they have their own little sparring match in private. Obviously, it's Apollo's attempt to get his own other rematch in a way that he sees fit. After this, you owe me a favor. What favor? And the fact that it was answered in the first Creed as to who won the fight, I don't really think it was much of a surprise. Rocky III is one of the better sequels in the franchise, although not my personal favorite. That title still goes to Rocky VI, but I think it also has some of the best scenes and in a lot of ways does something very different in the Rocky franchise formula while still honoring what came before. Despite some scenes being very out of place tonally, at its core, I still think it has a very inspirational message that just because you fail doesn't necessarily make you a coward or a loser. May not be the strongest entry in the franchise, but it's definitely up there for me. Those are my thoughts on Rocky III. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are if you've seen this movie. Love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it, or you're just so-so on it? Either way, feel free to tell me in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.